Someone help!
These are human lives! That says wrong! They have families, children! They're our friends and we're watching them!
Not subscribe.
Car D Kaizoku.
Please buy my new Don. Maybe make your deck go dun dun. Baby, I know you wanna buy dun dun. My Don da Don Don Don. This video is sponsored by Card Market, Europe's largest online marketplace for trading card games. This video is sponsored by Sleeve Chief. Their Solo Hunter collection is dropping on Sunday. Use code CardKaizoku for 5% off your order. So, should we ban Red Purple Law? A few days ago, I made a joke video about the topic, but it did seem like a lot of you were expecting a serious video. And yeah, I admit, I did laugh at first at your misery, but then I started to feel bad. So yeah, I'm doing this video to answer that question in earnest. Should Red Purple Law be banned? We'll take an actual look into whether or not we should do that. And just to preface this video, my stance is not to ban or restrict any cards, but despite that, I think you can't deny how prevalent Red Purple Law is at the moment. And I actually wrote a script for this video. I typed for like 40 minutes, but my computer blue screened, so I lost it all. So I'm going to do this live on the fly while that information from the script is still fresh in my mind, I hope. And yeah, help fund me fixing my computer by buying my Dawn if you can. Thanks. Okay. So the last few, or actually every major tournament in Asia so far in OP08 has been a Red Purple Law mirror. We have the Singapore Grand Asia Open, the Singapore Championship Series, the Aichi Prefecture, Hiroshima Prefecture, and Tokyo Prefecture Championship Series. Every single one of those was a Red Purple Law mirror. There's that Philippines Grand Asia Open too. I don't know if it finished or not, or if the deck lists are anywhere online. I'm pretty sure it was a Red Purple Law mirror too, if it was. But yeah, that is at least 5-6 tournaments where Red Purple Law is the top 1 and 2 decks. I don't believe it has ever been this ubiquitous in representation of one particular deck in the meta. Now, when you think of best deck in format in the history of One Piece, the two other leaders that come to mind are Sakazuki and Whitebeard. So I guess before judging Red Purple Law, let's take a look at the history of the other two best decks in formats in their respective metas. So we'll start with OP02 Whitebeard, Edward Newgate. He is special in that he's a 6k leader, the first of his kind, and his leader ability is also very unique. You took a life card to your hand every turn, so to compensate for that, he starts at 6 life. This was a very ambitious design choice for a card, especially in the game's second ever expansion. Really like flips the game on its head, because his leader ability basically sets you on a clock. You want to kill your opponent before you run out of counter in hand and defensive counter events as well. Now, the reason Whitebeard was strong in his meta was that pretty much every other color at the time was not as developed as Red, right? Red had the best aggressive cards with Rush and like cards that could bypass blockers. Red also had the best defensive events with Radical Beam countering for 4 Dawn for 1 Dawn, and Guard Point countering for 3k for 1 Dawn as well. And Whitebeard himself being able to swing 6k over every other 5k leader at the time, meaning it takes a 2k to even stop his bear leader hit. So this makes it really hard for your opponent to basically survive against you, because even if you go to 0 life with your leader ability, you do have a lot of defense in your hand to even survive that. But it wasn't undoable, right? There was a way to kill Whitebeard. That is until people started running Moby Dick in their deck. So Moby Dick is a stage card that also came out in OP02. It was debated whether you should run this card or not. Some Whitebeards like to run it, some thought it was too inconsistent, depending on the stage card, to win you the game. Because what this stage card does is, if you have 1 or less life, your leader and all your characters with the Whitebeard Pirates type get plus 2000 power for free, basically. Games where you drew this stage card and played it early enough, you're able to bust out your opponent with ease. It was getting to the point at the end of the OP02 meta where it was becoming Whitebeard mirrors, and the Whitebeard who ran Moby Dick was able to overwhelm the Whitebeard who didn't run Moby Dick. So yeah, it became a staple in the deck. It was around this time that people were having the same complaints with Red Purple Law nowadays, right? Whitebeard was too strong, it was gatekeeping other weaker decks from being able to be viable in the meta. It was practically the only deck in the meta, but Bandai still did not do anything about the deck in OP03, in the beginning at least. So if the strategy in O2 to play against what people call Dickbeard, Moby Dickbeard, was to hope they'd never draw the stage card, it became a lot harder to do that in OP03 with the introduction of this searcher. So for one Dawn, it greatly increased the consistency of finding the stage card. It became such a consistent strategy that Bandai did in fact ban Moby Deck, I believe a couple weeks into the meta. So this was an instance where Bandai actually reacted really quickly. They didn't wait until the end of OP03 to stop this. They also banned Kabaji for the Nami deck. They didn't let Nami get a chance to become too oppressive, I guess. I guess we'll never see that meta though. But yeah, Whitebeard, after the ban of Moby Dick, did become less ubiquitous in the meta. I guess I like saying that word, ubiquitous. Yeah, he just was not the only red deck in the meta. Red was still the strongest color, of course, but he did share the spotlight with Roronoa Zoro, OP01, and also OP01 Trafalgar Law, Red-Green Law. And actually, people still complained about the meta at this point, where all the decks were red. They complained there was too much red was too strong. But honestly, I kind of liked this meta, because despite one color being overrepresented, it was still 3 very distinctive playstyle decks making up the top of the meta, right? It wasn't just Red Purple Law, it wasn't just Sakazuki, it wasn't just Whitebeard, it was Whitebeard plus Zoro plus Law. 3 decks that played completely differently from each other. They don't even share too many of the same cards. So because of that, I kind of felt like this was a healthy meta. Of course, we would have loved to see other colors at the top, but honestly, it's a lot better than it is now at the moment with Red Purple Law. So that was pretty much the meta until OP05. Well, I guess, yeah, Katakuri made his way in there at some point too in 03, but yeah, OP05 hit, and then this guy took over. Not at first though. So Sakazuki is a blue-black leader. That means he has 4 starting life because he's dual color, but what his leader ability does is activate main once per turn. You can discard a card from your hand and then draw a card, basically allowing you to cycle your hand to find answers. And then when you attack with the leader, you give -1 cost to a character. So pretty much this leader had no downside to use his leader ability. It was only positives. Usually with other leaders, it kind of costs something, or there's like strict requirements to meet. But with Sakazuki, from the first turn, you could use your leader ability. From the first turn, you can attack. You could take advantage of both parts of his leader ability. So yeah, just a very strong leader that just needed people to figure out his deck. So at first, yeah, he was not as overwhelming in the meta. Whitebeard was still winning, Katakuri was still winning, Zoro was still winning. But as the meta progressed, people started to figure this deck out with cards like Great Eruption, being able to give -2 cost to something and then replacing itself. This card did get banned at some point, we'll get to that later. And then Houndblaze, being able to buff your searchers to make them into attacking bodies and get rid of a character. By bottom decking it, that's way better than KOing, because this gets rid of cards that can't be KO'd. And then people were starting to catch on to Rebecca being an insane card. It's a 4-cost blocker that can bring back a 3 to 7 cost black character to your hand, and then you can play a 3 cost from your hand. These are 2 separate effects too, so you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to use this blocker. And they would play cards like this Hina from the starter deck. Pretty much people wrote off starter deck 6 as like one of the worst starter decks, but this Sakazuki deck brought it back into popularity. It pretty much raised the price of the deck to insane heights. And then people started to figure out that, oh, if you combo cards like Hina, Great Eruption, and your leader ability, this 05 Lucci that came in the same set, being able to kill a 1 cost and a 2 cost, that's pretty much any card in the game you can make into a 1 or 2 cost. So this became like the premier removal card in the format, because he himself is a 6k attacker for 4 on 2, so he's great as a vanilla. So not only does this leader fix your hand, it also is able to remove stuff on board and develop attackers, and attack for big numbers himself with cards like Houndblaze, and yeah, Hina, even Hina herself is an attacker at 5k. So people were starting to realize how strong of a deck this was. It still shared the spotlight with Purple Luffy, though it was starting to lose steam by the end of the meta, as people were able to figure out how to make Purple Luffy's characters be able to be KO'd by this Lucci. In fact, I think the only opposition to Sakazuki at this time was Katakuri and Enel, to a degree, playing characters that were just too big to be KO'd. But that all kind of changed once this asshole came out, OB06, Gecko Moria. This pretty much carries the entire black color, and is the reason why Sakazuki is the best deck in format from OP06 to the end of EV01. Because what Gecko Moria does is it lets you play a 4 cost or less and a 2 cost or less character from your trash. One of them comes out active, the other one comes out rested. There's so much combo potential in a Sakazuki deck, or any black deck with this card, because conveniently, they have access to a blocker that they can play from the discard that can also draw you another card on top of that. You can also play out the asshole removal card that is also a strong attacker and can KO 2 things. And then with the 2 cost portion of his effect, you have access to a lot of strong like cost reduction cards. So basically you develop a 9k attacker, you develop a 6k attacker that KO 2 things, and then you probably cleared your opponent's board, so you're left with 2 strong attackers, your opponent has nothing. You come back from the game, you leave your opponent in shambles. This is what makes Sakazuki such a strong deck in OP06 onward. But this time Bandai didn't do anything about it. OP05 Sakazuki was like top meta, but I guess not at the level that Whitebeard was in his prime. So yeah, I guess you could forgive Bandai for letting it pass one more set, but 06 Sakazuki was a different story. And in fact, the World Championships at this time was a Sakazuki mirror in the end too, between Guanrong and Jackson. So it just goes to show you the power of Sakazuki in the meta. And then oddly enough, even though Sakazuki was the top prevalent deck in the meta, they still printed out support for the deck. EB01 gave him T-Bone, a Navy 2k counter that can KO on play, that they could search with the deck. 06 gave them Tashigi, another 1-cost searcher that can search even for brand new, so you can search into another searcher. And this one doesn't discard too. So even with Sakazuki being the best deck in the format, they printed out more cards that made it even better in the format. The bester deck in the format, I guess. And yeah, it wasn't until the end of EB01, after the conclusion of the World Championship Finals, that they announced that Sakazuki and Great Eruption was going to be banned. Reject 2. So that took, what, 3 sets? Or 2 sets and like a mid-set extra booster to handle Sakazuki. And this time they didn't just ban a stage card, right? Banning a stage card for Whitebeard made him within the acceptable power limit, but in Sakazuki's case, they banned the leader out entirely. And not only that, they kind of hit other black decks by getting rid of Great Eruption. But to be honest, I think the problematic card is Gecko Moria, because even in today's meta, Lucci runs them, Black Yellow Luffy runs them, Gecko Moria runs them. There's no way to play any of these black decks without this card. I feel like that is a crutch in design. It's a big problem, right? There should be black decks that can compete, that can exist without this card, this one singular card. But for some reason, the integral like identity and playstyle of the top 3 black decks in the meta at the moment do depend on this Gecko Moria card. So yeah, if we do ban this card, like it cripples 3 decks. I don't think they should have designed those leaders in the way that like they need this card to even survive. Oh yeah, this Brook too, I forgot to mention Brook. This is another card that benefits Sakazuki and any deck that runs 8-cost Gecko Moria. So we've seen 2 approaches now where you ban the cards that make the leader strong and that fix Whitebeard at least. And then we have the approach where we ban the leader in general, because I guess they couldn't figure out a way to fix it. So let's take a look at Red Purple Law and why he's strong in the meta. So some people think it's just his leader ability, being able to cheat out a second body for the turn without having to pay Dawn for anything, because you're minusing Dawn. Some people think that the minusing Dawn is the trade-off for that strong effect, because you're playing something with the cost of 4 or less, so -3 Dawn is equal to the opportunity cost of playing a 4-drop from your hand for free, because it does set you like more than a turn behind. You're a turn and a half behind in that case. But this does get alleviated somewhat with all the ramp cards you run in the deck. So the balance there is that you're minusing Dawn to play out mediocre ramp cards that are 4 costs that have like a 5k stat line. So in that regard, I personally think it's kind of fair. Some other people also point to Reiju being an issue. So Reiju is a 4-drop 5k attacker that was introduced in 06 that does on play. If you have equal to or less Dawn on your field than your opponent, and if you have 5 or less cards in your hand, you draw 2 cards. So one of the weaknesses of Reparable Law was that, yeah, you're dumping 2 cards from your hand every turn. This does mean that you do run out of steam, and you only have 4 life to take cards from into your hand as a resource. So it was like a balancing act of playing characters where you know that you can get value out of them and they won't die, and also keeping yourself alive so that you can finish off your opponent. In a like Gecko Moria and Sakazuki heavy meta, playing out 2 4-drops, they're not going to last long, right? That's the reason Sakazuki was good in the Purple Luffy. They're able to kill 2 5 costs on board, so 2 4 costs is even easier than that. What Reiju does is lets you refill your hand. It's 1 card for +2 in hand. That's great card advantage. It replaces yourself and then +1 on top of that. And then yeah, you just play out more bodies than the opponent has removal to handle at this point. So a lot of people point to Reiju being a card that is what makes Reparable Law broken. My stance on that is that in the 06 and 07 meta, this is fine actually, right? If this was an issue that makes Law broken, then it would have been an issue in 07, but clearly it wasn't, as Law shared the spotlight with Lucci and Black Yellow Luffy and Enel. Could it be that people just didn't figure out how to play Red Purple Law optimally yet? It could be, but that's the more like complicated reasoning behind it. I'd like to go from the more simple one, that's usually the more correct one, in that Reiju doesn't break Red Purple Law. It definitely helps it, makes it a viable top meta contender, but it did not make it the menace that he is now. On its own in a vacuum in 07 and 06. Some people also point to Raise Max in 06 also being an issue, right? Because prior to this, we only had 4 copies of the -3k effect for one Dawn with Gordon, Promo Gordon. 06 gave us this functional reprint, allowing us to run 8 copies of this effect. Some people think that having 8 copies is too much, it lets us answer everything on board. But to be honest, I also feel like this isn't an issue, right? Because Sakazuki and Gecko Moria and Lucci also have access to this kind of effect. I mean, yeah, they banned Great Eruption, but this one drew you a card, so you didn't go down in card advantage. You just got a free -2k to kill something. Raise Max at least goes to the bottom of your deck, so yeah, it doesn't replace himself. You're down 1 card in hand if you play this. But yeah, my reasoning for not banning Raise Max is that there's cards like Ice Age in black that pretty much do the same thing. One Dawn for -5 cost that allows black decks to KO anything. Similarly to a Raise Max, one Dawn for -3k allows us to bottom deck anything. They even printed out Tempest Kick Rankyaku in 07, which is basically Great Eruption, but you need to have 10 cards in your trash to use it. So one Dawn for minus resource to be able to meet a removal threshold is a design space that Bandai does not have a problem with, and I don't think it's an issue either. So we have to look at the cards in 08, right? Because this is the meta where Red Purple Law is the menace that he is. So what did 08 give us that kind of broke the meta? Well, here's Pudding, a 3 cost, 4k attacker. What she does is on your turn, once per turn, when Dawn is returned to your Dawn deck, you can add a Dawn from your Dawn deck as rested. Pretty much like the 5 cost kid, that is a staple in the deck, except the Dawn doesn't come back active. But what makes Pudding especially devastating in a Red Purple Law deck is that you now have something you can do on your 3 Dawn turn, you have something you can do on your 4 Dawn turn even. Prior to this, you kind of want to wait until you're at 6 Dawn to play your 5 cost kid on top of a Gordon to give -3k to something and then bottom deck it and get a Dawn back so you're not too far behind in Dawn. Pudding kind of makes it so that we can do this on our 4 Dawn turn, right? 3 Dawn for Pudding, play out a Gordon, -3k to something, bottom deck it, you get a Dawn back from Pudding, you cheat out a Sachi Penguin, you get 2 more Dawn back, you're back up to 4, allowing you to go to 6 next turn, in which case you can play a Kid, Gordon, bottom deck, you get 2 Dawn back after that. So it just snowballs, it lets you start activating your leader ability a turn earlier, which makes all the difference in the world. If your opponent has no early game to contest you, you're just dominating from the start. And then it just costs 1 Dawn onto Pudding to make her an attacker too. The other card added in 08, which is, I think a lot of people kind of point the finger at Black Moria. It's a new 2k, and what she does is for 3, you can play her out and then activate main once per turn if you have no other Black Moria. You can add up to 5 Dawn cards from your Dawn deck as rested, then at the end of your turn, you can return Dawn cards from your field to your Dawn deck until you have the equal amount as your opponent. So this is like a turbo insane utility card for the deck. Not only is she a 2k counter, meaning that she's useful in hand, even if you don't play her out. The fact that she can ramp you 5 Dawn, and then you keep however many to match your opponent, that is an insane comeback mechanic of Red Purple Law. This allows you to be really, really greedy with your leader ability too. At worst, she's a Shachi and Penguin, which is basically meaning that you have 8 copies of Shachi and Penguin in your deck now. And at best, she completely ramps you the 5 Dawn, you get to keep all 5. Against opponents that don't minus Dawn, you're able to recover a lot of Dawn with Black Moria. This lets you be really aggressive early, cheating out stuff like Sanjis and Reijus to draw you more cards without having to worry about keeping up Dawn. Because again, the other weakness of Law, or I guess inexperienced Red Purple Law players in the past, was that if you use your leader ability too much, you just don't have any Dawn to play out bigger characters or to combo, right? You won't have Dawn to play Kid and a Gordon, that's 6 Dawn. You won't have Dawn for your characters to attack for lethal. You just have a lot less options if you use your leader ability too willy-nilly. A lot of people feel that Black Maria kind of cancels out that nuance in the playstyle. You could just play out Reijus, draw 2 cards, play out Sanjis, and then when shit hits the fan, cheat out Black Maria, recover 5 Dawn, and you're back in the game on your next turn. So the combination of these 2 cards make it really, really unrestricted to use your leader ability. It removes a lot of the nuance. You don't have to really plan out too much because you know you have these cards that'll bail you out. And that's the case against every other leader. I do have to say though, in the Ripple Law mirror, when you play out your puddings and Black Marias matters, but that's because that's the mirror, right? Mirrors are always like that. But yeah, this does kind of dumb down the matchups against every other deck with Ripple Law. Now, what can we do about it? Well, some people suggest just banning Black Maria, or even restricting pudding or something. And honestly, that may fix the issue, right? If in 07 Law was not as dominating as he is now, then removing the cards that made him as dominating as he is now should in theory fix the problem. So I can't deny that, but the issue comes in that like Black Maria was not printed solely for Red Purple Law. It was printed to help a lot of other decks out, a lot of purple decks. So removing this because it helps Red Purple Law too much kind of guts a lot of other purple decks. Like even friggin' starter deck 4 Kaido was starting to see play again because of this card. If we remove it, he goes back into the dumpster. So is that the trade-off we want? Do we want one card like this making other decks viable to not be able to exist because it makes one other deck too strong? So there's that argument there. And a lot of people are just calling for the ban on the leader in general because he kind of limits the design space. If Red Purple Law didn't exist, Black Maria can be freely able to be in the meta, to be used by other purple decks. But again, I personally don't like it when cards get banned outright like that, especially leaders. I don't like the fact that an entire like deck playstyle can just be removed like that without any attempts to like fix it or try to figure out tech against it. So then how do we go about fixing it, right? So that we can keep Red Purple Law in the game? Well, the easiest answer, and the answer that probably a lot of people don't want, is power creep the other leaders, right? If every other leader got new options that could compete, that would level the playing field, but that introduces a whole like new can of worms, right? If you overbuff other leaders, then you have an issue of that leader being the best deck in the format. Because for other leaders to even match Red Purple Law's power, they'll need like a lot of game mechanic defining cards like this Black Maria. So if other colors had a card this good, who knows, maybe you're making the next monster in the next format. Another way to fix it is to errata cards. So a lot of people were suggesting if maybe Black Maria only was able to do this effect if you ran a Animal Kingdom Pirates leader. That would fix the issues, right? Everyone gets to have their cake and eat it. Kaido gets to run Black Maria, King gets to run Black Maria, Law can't. So that route I feel like would be the best of both worlds, the most diplomatic solution. And it's not like they haven't done an errata like that before, right? I believe Nami from OP01 in the very first printing stated that she only searched for Straw Hat type characters, but it was later corrected to Straw Hat type cards. I forgot if that was a rule change or if they just typoed it from the beginning. If they typoed it from the beginning and they meant any Straw Hat card from the beginning, then maybe that argument doesn't hold up. But yeah, that's pretty much why Red Purple Law is the problem that he is now. And then with Bandai's precedent for what they've done in the past, they've banned cards that made the leaders strong. So they could ban Black Maria, they could errata it, like they did with Moby Dick for Whitebeard. But we've also seen them outright ban leaders like Blue Black Sakazuki, so they could just outright ban Red Purple Law. What Bandai will do, I'm curious to see. I think they have to do something. You can't have Red Purple Law be the top 2 decks of the first 5 major tournaments of your format, right? So yeah, I'm very curious to see what they'll do. Me personally, I would like Black Maria to be errated, as I mentioned. I feel like that's the most diplomatic solution, right? It lets the Red Purple Law players still play Red Purple Law, and it lets the other purple leaders still play Black Maria. And I can't think of any downsides to doing that, other than like having to print corrected text for this card. But that would also mean that the old text version of this card will get like collector's value too. Yeah, so it's like win-win-win all around. So I guess I'll go with that solution, Bandai. It's in your court now. All right, that's my serious thoughts on Red Purple Law and the 08 meta. Let me know what you guys thought of that. I kind of did that one on the fly. I don't know if you could tell, it's a lot more awkward when I do things live like that. And again, I wrote out a freaking script and it got deleted because my computer blue screened. I have to figure out what's wrong with my computer. I gotta fix that. But yeah, if you like this kind of video, if I'm going to do more videos like this where I do like analysis of the game and not just play games on the sim, let me know so I can cater my content to what you guys want to see. Unless I really don't like to do it because I'm going to do what I want anyway. Okay, bye.
Card D Kaizoku.